Good morning. Hi, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, excellent. Hi, I'm Nandita Dukuna, and I write books for children. Especially in the last couple of years, I've written a couple of picture books, such as these, and books for slightly older readers, chapter books, such as this one, and the story that I'm very excited to bring to you all today, My Trip to La La Land. And I believe some of you may have read excerpts from it, some of you have not. It doesn't matter for this session because I'm going to talk to you about this book. We're going to talk about why I wrote this book, how I wrote this book. And if we have some time, I would love to take some questions as well on the story, on writing, on anything that you would like to interact with. So My Trip to La La Land is a travel adventure. It is a fiction book. I've written this story about 4 or 5 years back, and it was based on a trip I did to Ladakh many years ago. But it is a travel fiction adventure book. Let me share screen and tell you a little more about the story. So do you all love to travel? I'm sure there are many of you who like many parts about traveling. It takes us places, it's adventurous, we get to try new stuff, right? New food, new clothes, cultures, beaches, mountains. But sometimes there are parts of travel you may not like as well, right? I recently did a session with children at school, and I said, do you love travel? And then some of them said, yeah, but sometimes the food gets too much, or I get motion sickness, or so they love to travel, and yet they love home. And this book is about this young girl called Tavashi, who didn't like to travel. No. It was a summer holidays, and her idea of a wonderful summer holiday was sitting at home in her bedroom on her bed with books, lots of books. As you can see from the lovely cover designed by Tasneem Marmaruddin, there's one thing Tavashi does love, and that's books. So her dream holiday was spending time with one book after another book, and pretty much nothing else. But the problem, this may happen to you sometimes. Her mother had very different ideas from her about how one spends vacation. If you all have had similar experiences, do put it down in chat, where you have a wonderful idea about what you want to do in the holidays, but parents may have completely different views. I remember when I was young, I said, holidays, yippee, yay, I'll go swimming, I'll read. That was me too. And mom would go, yippee, yay, holidays, now you can practice the piano. Not my idea for holiday. So Tavashi's mother, what was her idea for holiday? She was a super active lady, super active. I'm going to read you 2 lines, which gives you Tavashi's description of her mother. Mom goes jogging morning and evening, summer and winter, on her tennis days, kickboxing days, power yoga days, karate days, cleanup days, lawn digging days, and even on her birthday. Totally psycho. That is how Tavashi describes her own mother. So her mother's idea of a holiday was a super active, super charged up adventure. And this year, she wanted to take Tavashi far away, high up mountains to a distant place in India called Ladakh. Yeah, Ladakh. And she had an idea. She wanted to involve Tavashi with one of her projects. She was setting up a library in Ladakh. Mom, says Tavashi, school holidays in a school? Tavashi, said her mom, you love books. Duh. I love reading them, not climbing up mountains with them, says Tavashi. So there you have it. And so I wrote this book, and it's written in the form of a travel diary. So the entire book is Tavashi's diary experiences, written one entry after another in Tavashi's own words. So I don't know if any of you maintain a diary. It's a wonderful hobby. I have two daughters, they're 8 and 11, and they not only keep personal diaries, they also have travel diaries where they write a lot about all their holidays and vacations, what they like to do. So that's where I got this idea, and to use a format of a diary. So we have Tavishi, who says, hello, travel diary. And at the start of the book, it's when, she's being dragged on this vacation, and I don't know why I'm doing this. And her mother barges into her room and she tells all about it. And she says, the problem with you, Tavishi, or rather there are two problems, is your overactive imagination and underactive everything else. What's wrong with imagination, says Tavishi? It can be totally wonderful. Like, look at that, in the beginning of the book, when her mother's coming in and telling her about the trip, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. Look at Tavishi, you know what she's imagining? She's imagining her mom is like a giant balloon full of a lot of gas escaping as she's talking. And the more she shouts at Tavishi, the less and less air she has. Fuss, fuss, fuss. So by the end, she's hoping she has nothing left to say. So imagination can be quite useful sometimes. But then her mother says, now we have to go on this holiday, and Tavishi's whole issue and where our book starts is, how am I going to get out of this? I'll just see if you all have any. Okay. How am I going to get out of this? And that's where we get into our entire story, which I've written. It's based over a period of 1 week, if you've read any bits of the book. So day 1 to day 7, how they go to Ladakh, their adventure there, and the massive problems they run into, thanks to, as we already know, Tavishi's overactive imagination. So since this book is based in Ladakh, I wanted to share two things with you all today before we get into your questions. The first is a little bit about Ladakh itself. I don't know how many of you all have been to Ladakh. If you have, please do share in the chat, in the Q&A about your experiences. But I went, like I said, many, many years ago, and I fell in love with it. It's a gorgeous place, mountainous region, high up in North India. Northernmost tip of India, actually. So if you know Jammu and Kashmir, the state, it's to the eastern part. It sits on top of the great Himalayan range. And these are some photographs from my trip to Ladakh. If you can see a rear view mirror of a car screen, that's because we were going in the car, and that's me leaning out, trying to photograph the beautiful snow-capped mountains as we went past. We were on our way to one of the highest passes, Khardungla in Ladakh. A pass is a way through mountains. And so that's the first interesting fact I learned about Ladakh. Why is it called Ladakh? Is Ladakh the land of ice? Is it about the high passes like I just spoke about, which are like 17,000, 20,000, 21,000 feet above sea level? That's the kind of distance we're traveling at. Or is it like in our book, La La Land? And yes, it is Ladakh, land of high passes, like the roads that I'm on in that photograph. And it's not just a land of very high passes and snow-capped mountains. It's a land of contrasts. There were greens and blues, because you'll have these brown mountain ranges, and then out of the blue, you'll suddenly come across a lush green valley or a mustard field full of flowers. And that's the gorgeousness of the place. Very stark and very beautiful at the same time. And in many parts, this landscape is very unique. You might want to take a guess. Is it called a moonscape, like you're walking on the moon? A grayscape, because that's one color all around. Shrubland, because that's all that grows past trees here and there. It's moonscape, because the wind, this is interesting, literally whips the mountain into interesting shapes and formations. And that's something Tavishi talks about as well later in the book. I remember on our trip, we saw lakes and rivers. That's a very interesting bridge, the one you can see with the prayer flags, the colorful prayer flags strung all over, because it features in our story. I might read a little bit later on, and that bridge plays a very important role in our story. And there are these incredible flora and fauna, animals and birds, because of the kind of altitude. You'll see birds and animals you don't see anywhere else. Like the wonderful snow leopard, very elusive, very rare to spot. The blue sheep, which is not blue, it has a gray fur coat, a camel with two humps. Could you imagine that? You can see that, the Bactrian camel. There's a character that features in our book, the gray ghost. It's one of these. And it's the snow leopard, ghost-like, because it's very difficult to spot and find. Finally, these are some of the wonderful people in Ladakh. And these are reminiscent of the kind of people Tavashi met. So as you remember, her mother dragged her to the school and they stayed at the house of the school teacher there, and his daughter Tashi. Tashi is a very important character in our book. Tashi and Tavashi did not hit it off. Not at all in the beginning. They did not get along. So Tavashi was in a place she didn't want to be, in a cold climate, dragged by her mother, a project coming up where she has to carry these book up mountains. And there was this Tashi, 4-year-old, was sticking to her wherever she went. I don't know if any of you have siblings. Do you? You have fun. You do things together, yeah? And sometimes you fight, right? That's the fun and the not so fun parts of having a sibling. So Tashi had no sibling. So when she met this big older girl, city girl, Tavishi, she was fascinated by her, Tashi, who's from Ladakh. And she followed her wherever she went. And for the older Tavishi, this was like very annoying. So she called her Chipku. So she said, who's this Chipku following me wherever I go? And I'm going to read you an excerpt a little later about Tavashi and Tashi and one of their moments in Ladakh. I'm just going to, okay, I'll keep the screen up because maybe I'll put up a few illustrations while I read you this short excerpt. Okay. So now I shall read one chapter from the book. And after that, after you've gotten a little better feel of this book, I'll tell you about the story behind the story. There are parts of the story that are actually true and that inspired this entire book. Fantastical stories. But I'll tell you that story right after I read a small excerpt from this book. Remember that it was written by Tavishi in a journal format. Dear diary, yesterday was one long journey. This is when Tavishi has already reached Ladakh and they're about to go to that school. The night before, Mom had come to my room and she said, now sleep. Tomorrow we go to the school and it's an hour's journey. Mom, we just got here, another drive? No, said Mom, smiling, an evil. Wait till you hear this smile. Tomorrow we walk. What? Tuesday, the next day. Ouch, diary, my legs. What a crazy walk that was to the school. First, I woke up hearing honk, honk. Yes, I thought, a car's come to take us. And I ran outside. Honk, here. Mom was loading all her boxes on 10 donkeys. It was a total zoo. And that Chikku Tashi was helping her. Oh, no, no, no. Mom was all excited, loading her boxes, which had books and medicines and all material that she wanted to build a playground at the school. Come on, Tavishi, she said, help out. And here's the toolbox. I've got a special polka dotted shovel for you to help me dig when we set up the outdoor school stuff. Oh, no, 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 diary. How am I going to get out of all this? We gobbled breakfast and we set off. The headmaster was walking first, followed by the endless donkeys, Mom, and finally me with that Chikku Tashi hanging on. Diary, this Lala land was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was bare and the ground was full of pits. You should have seen me. It was cold, freezing cold. And yet in this place, you're so high up, you feel the sun directly. And it felt super hot at the same time. So I was in my sweater with a muffler and a woolly cap, but also smeared with sun lotion and also wearing glares. There you can see the picture of Tavishi. And I was shivering so much, my bones were rattling. In the summer, mom was darting on her head like all the mountain goats we saw around, and they were the only ones around. Look, Tavishi, it's like I'm on the moon, she said. Remember, Ladakh is full of moonscapes. Moon. Look, Tavishi, can you try and spot the Brahmini duck? And mom whipped out her binoculars. The bar-headed goose, ducks and geese. Oh, think of all the exciting activity coming up, she said, rubbing her hands together. I tried not to. It was time to act. Ouch, mom, I said, my legs. I groaned. Hold her hand, said mom. Was she asking me to help that baby nitwit Tashi walk? No, diary. She was asking that nitwit, who was also skipping about like a goat, to help me. Mom, I cried. I've got that mountain climbing sickness thingy. Really, I've got aches in my knees, feet, and toes. We've got to go back like now. Are you sure? Said mom, all cold and unbothered. It's called altitude sickness, and you feel it in your head, stomach, and nose, not knees, feet, and toes. I gave up and walked on. A garland of colorful flags fluttered ahead. Prayer flags, said Tashi. Here's what I prayed for. 1, to get home soon, like today, if possible. 2, dear God, when are we reaching this school? I was sweating and shivering, and this time the headache had arrived and was thudding in my head like a hammer or a drill. She was thinking of all the work coming up in the school. I guess God heard at least one of my prayers, for here's what I spotted after reaching that last stream to be crossed. A group of children in maroon sweaters were standing on the other side, waiting for us and cheering, Jule, Jule. And that in Ladakhi means hello. Wow, we'd arrived. There were around 20 children and another teacher waiting for us. Diary, they were the whole school. This was unlike any school I had ever seen before. Our adventure had begun. And I'm going to stop there from reading for now. And what happens after this is, well, actually, 2 things happen. One happens because of Tavishi and her wild imagination. She almost derails the entire school project with no small help from Tashi, little Tashi, the headmaster's daughter. And the second thing that happens is because of nature. There's a storm, and the bridge that they crossed to get to the school, the one with the prayer flags, the bridge collapses and they're trapped in that school. So what are they going to do? Can they get out of there? Is the mother able to complete a project on time? And what can Tavishi do? Because while all this happens, all these bad things happen, there's one beautiful thing that happens. And that is Tavishi begins to fall in love with the place, with La La Land, as she calls Ladakh, with the people of Ladakh. And just at the time when she's created the biggest mess ever. So what can one girl do stuck here in this cold mountainous school, cut off from the rest of the world? And you can read the rest of the story to see what happens and if she's able to get herself out of there with that wild imagination of hers. And what I'm going to do for a few minutes is now, like I promised, share the story of how I got the idea for this story. Sometimes truth is actually stranger than fiction. And I'm going to tell you the story of a lady called Sujata Sahu. This lady is actually from Gurgaon, from Delhi. Many years ago, she'd just come back to India and began teaching. Earlier, she used to be in the US. And she began teaching. And Sujata had a hobby, and that was trekking. And lucky for us and for many, she used to go to Ladakh on long treks, not unlike Tavishi's long walk through the moonscape of Ladakh. And she used to go alone. And one day she came across a school, and that's the school kind of school you see in the image over there. And it was a very peculiar school. It had 5 students in the whole school and 2 teachers. It was almost like a shed, the whole school, and just these 5 children and 2 teachers. And she went walking a little further up, much further up, and she came across another school. This time, 7 students and 1 teacher. What was going on? There's another school she was used to in big Indian cities, in Mumbai, in Delhi, in the US where she came from. And she found out something even more strange. I mean, this was strange enough. She found out that these children had walked for kilometers upon kilometers up difficult terrain for hours to reach that school every day, all the way walking and all the way walking back. Because they love school that much. They didn't want to miss a day of school. And that's the kind of walk they had every day to get to that school. That's why the teachers made the walk too, because these were the children who were so keen to attend school. And she was blown away by this wonderful spirit of school. But as you can imagine, it's very difficult to get anything to the schools there. So they were very bare, very plain. Where were I mean, we take so much for granted in our schools, right? But there was some stuff missing from these schools. Storybooks, swings and slides and playgrounds, all the fun stuff. And Sujata said, what can I do? I mean, if they're doing so much to get to the schools, what can I do? And she went back home and she thought about it, and she thought because instead of rushing for action, she wanted to put together a group of people, get stuff to help them. And after 2 years, she did. She started an organization called 17,000 Feet. Funny name, but that's the name because that's the highest they have ever climbed to reach such schools. And climb they did with donkeys, just like Tavashi and her mother took, loaded with books and equipment and fun stuff for the kids, and stuff to set up schools. And you can see the schools there. I've got a couple of them. These pictures are real pictures. You have some of the pictures even at the back of this story of schools in Ladakh. That's them doing assembly in the freezing cold, surrounded by the beautiful hills of Ladakh. And that's a picture of volunteers of 17,000 Feet Foundation as they take books up to these children and set up libraries, set up playgrounds like the one you see. And the children, the faces of joy, when I saw on their website of 17,000 Feet, what a difference they had made to so many lives. Things we take for granted, like I said. And there you have it. Many schools by now, they've reached thousands of schools, thousands of children, and connected them with infrastructure, with laptops, with playground, and with libraries. There you have one of the libraries, which is what Tavashi's mother in the story wanted to set up, a library in a remote mountain in a school. Yay, books! And La La Land is now one of those books in their libraries. I'm so proud to share. The last image I want to share with you is one of the volunteers reading the books to 17,000 Feet. One of my friends actually volunteered for them, and that's how I first saw her post. And I heard about how they have a new program called Voluntourism. Now, some of you may have heard of volunteers, where you when you offer to do something. Some of you may have heard of tourists, where you love to go and see a new place. So 17,000 feet. Just give me a second. I'm going to click. Sorry, that happens when I talk a lot. 17,000 feet started a voluntourism program where you could volunteer to help them and be a tourist at the same time, seeing a place in a very authentic, beautiful way. And that's the program I heard of that got me started imagining what if a girl like Tavashi was involved in something like this. So that's the story of La La Land. I'd be very happy now to hear from all of you. If you've further questions, I'm just going to take a second to drink some. Sorry about that. So if you now have any questions for me, either you or the fREADom team, I would love to hear from you and answer any of those. You can put it in the chat box. No questions? Anything on writing or my books or La La Land?
Nandita, I had something out of curiosity. No, the way how you came up with this book, because it's technically a lot of good part of it is from your own experience, right? So given that we do have a lot of, so you know, right, at fREADom, we do encourage kids to write a lot. So even on the app, we have a blog section. We do publish kids who come up with their own work. So we do that. So now from your perspective, what was that very first motivation or that trigger that got you into writing?
Actually, mine is a very interesting story. I came into writing very late. I was in corporate life for over 13 years. I was a management consultant, nothing to do with writing, literature, or anything of the sort. I was with KPMG, Anderson. And about almost now 5 years ago, I took a sabbatical, a break, so I could spend more time at home with my children and doing the things I love. And one of the things I've always loved is writing. So since I finally had time, I went back to writing. Some friends read the book and said, why didn't you give it to publishers? My first book got accepted, and it seemed to be working. And more importantly, I loved what I was doing so much that I never went back to my first job. I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to keep doing. And that's how I actually got into writing 5 years ago. Completely changed career tracks. But while I wasn't a regular writer before that, if there's one thing I've done through and through always, it's reading. I've been a sort of lifelong reader, and I'm in no doubt that that's what has gotten me to writing books, because I really wanted to be like my favorite authors, to be able to literally conjure up new worlds the way they did, characters, imagination. And the way I do it is to weave fact and fiction. So weave in little bits of, like you said, my life, inspiration around me, wonderful stories I read about, true life stories, and fictionalize these in many ways. So that is a little bit about my author's journey.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's one good motivation, or that's one good piece where a lot of these budding writers, or even the younger ones, older ones, anybody, that's the point where it decides whether you can actually go ahead or not. That first push, actually.
Yes.
Anyways, we do not have any questions. I have just checked. We don't have anything. That was great. I mean, thank you so much. And I really loved your energy. It was more amazing. I mean, I'm sure I have been reading. I read the excerpt. I didn't read the complete book. But then now, the way I was listening to you, I feel like, no, I want to do this for the entire book and not really read it. That was really, really nice of you.
My pleasure. And I
really,
hope you all go ahead to read the rest of the story as well.
Definitely, definitely. You left it at such a cliffhanger, so I don't think we have a choice now. I mean, even for me, for that matter, I don't mind really. I mean, I still enjoy reading kids' books. So yeah, definitely. So thank you so much.
Books all the time. Yeah.
Oh, I love reading them. I love gifting kids books, and I make sure I read them.
Reading, I now, when I'm with the book, I say, "Don't disturb me. I'm working."
Yeah, no, that's
read and read some more. The last words that I would like to leave with all of you today. You'll have access to so many wonderful things, apps, stuff like fREADom, and books and more books. So have a great rest of the day. Have a lovely weekend and keep reading. Thank you.